Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Usama, and today I'm joined by Pernilla Bergmark, all the way from Stockholm, Sweden. She's a researcher in telecommunications with a focus on sustainability. So, with that, we'll get started. Pernilla, thank you so much, first of all, for being here with us, and how had your day been so far?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on the show. I've had a great day. I were participating virtually
Mm-hmm.
in an event in Romania, actually, where I gave a presentation, and then I've
Mm-hmm.
been in all sorts of meetings,
Yeah.
also virtually. So
Uh-huh.
it's great. The technology works.
So, Pernilla, we're very excited to have you on board. So, walk us through your professional journey. How had it been for you, and how did your decision making help you in being where you are today?
Yeah, so I've been around for a while, let's say. So I first started my
Yeah.
my education at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology in
Mm-hmm.
Stockholm. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm an electrical engineer by education.
Mm-hmm.
I also already then had a strong interest in environment, so I tried some extra courses there. I also studied educational sciences for a bit and worked extra
Mm-hmm.
as a teacher and those sorts of things during those
Mm-hmm.
years. Um, I had this interest in sustainability, but that was not really an option at that time. There were not many courses around and so on. You could have like tiny courses, but not
Right.
like a specialty.
Mm-hmm.
So but I was also interested in medical science, so I tried to
Mm-hmm.
focus on that a bit. Then
Okay.
I started my working life when it was there were no jobs available, no jobs at all to apply for.
Yeah.
But I finally found something on a temporary
Mm-hmm.
basis, and then joined
Right.
Ericsson. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Worked as a
Yeah.
electrical engineer, focused on system
Uh-huh.
design and energy efficiency for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then gradually moved myself into sustainability. And
Right.
I
Mm-hmm.
during that time, I realized when I first started working on sustainability that was what I really cared for.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been fully in sustainability since 2008, and uh, gradually moved myself more into first standardization and then research, and I've been in that role since 2011.
That's pretty cool. So, other than that, you've been in the research side and you've published a bunch of papers. So, if you were to just summarize for us, maybe, what had been the most exciting research work that you've done to date?
Yeah, and then that brings us back. So my role has been more of a research leader than
Mm-hmm.
it's not that I have this huge range of papers, but of course I have a couple of them since I've been active
Mm-hmm.
in the area for 10 years, and most
Right.
of course a lot of co-author as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, I mean, it's like what you have been working on most lately is probably what you feel most passionate about. So at
Right.
this point, we have started to dig a bit into the planetary boundaries. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you're familiar with that, but the planetary boundaries is a framework which has been developed by researchers from Stockholm Resilience Centers and others, which are looking into a set of Earth system processes which are critical to keep in balance, and then
Mm-hmm.
they have defined for those a the boundaries for each of those, and this has to do with things like climate change, of course, but also uh, mm, uh, biodiversity, and so forth. And then they define a
Mm-hmm.
safe operating space that we must keep within to have stable living conditions. So what we have done in the current research is that um, we are looking at this framework, and then we are trying to see, coming from a company context, because this is defined on a global scale, could we
Mm-hmm.
take the parameters, the indicators they are using, the control variables, and sort of define something which is measurable
Mm-hmm.
at a company scale, which connect to those to keep track of how we are developing as companies over time. So I've had a brilliant
Mm-hmm.
thesis student working with me or
Mm-hmm.
for me, Jennifer
Yeah.
Erlandsson,
Mm-hmm.
and we are now right now working on finalizing a paper together with Matthias Höjer, who is a professor at KTH,
Mm-hmm.
on this. So that is
Right.
something I like
Yeah.
very much. But then the most influential
Yeah.
part of work that I've been involved in is probably the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, which is not research but rather research dissemination. So the
Mm-hmm.
Exponential Roadmap was an initiative that took the there is a paper by Professor
Mm-hmm.
Rockström and others, which looks at the complicated climate science from IPCC and
Mm-hmm.
translates that into a simple rule of thumb, which says that we need to halve emissions this decade and then again and then again. So what we did
Right.
in this project, which was a collaboration between um, yeah, the academia, um, civil society organization, and also corporate organizations where we
Mm-hmm.
participated as a partner to look at the possibility or feasibility to halve emissions globally by 2030 and to do that sector by sector. And this
Mm-hmm.
work was then um, published and presented in the Climate Action Summit in California. So it
Mm-hmm.
was really influential in that
Right.
sense, and it also in the forming the narrative around halving. So I was a tiny part of
Mm-hmm.
that, working with policy and technology part, but that
Right.
was a great experience, of course.
Very interesting. So I want to talk more about on the topic of sustainability as far as telecoms are concerned, because now that it's an I would say it's a critical infrastructure for the world that we live in today. So
Mm.
how would you comment on the fact that how can standardization efforts help drive sustainability more in terms of the newer products that are coming in? Because again, it is a very competitive market. But what do you think how standardization will play a key role here in reaching that ambition of having energy emissions?
Yeah, and there are of course different types of standards. So the standardization I'm involved in, it's more the kind of standards which is about assessment,
Mm-hmm.
assessing the sustainability impacts of technology at different scales. So
Okay.
from product level to city level to global level, and then management standards. Which is the development of a trajectory for the sector and defining the net zero and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are, of course, the more technology oriented standards which are developed by the 3GPP. And I'm not so much
Mm-hmm.
involved there, but of course, both are important but in different ways. But one
Mm-hmm.
example how standards play a huge role was the work performed by colleagues in 5G, um,
Right.
where they were first working in research and realized that everyone was focused on the energy performance at uh, during the most challenging conditions, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, networks are not working on their top performance all the time, but
Yeah.
uh, it's usually the average situation is much less challenging. And
Mm-hmm.
since everyone optimized on the more challenging conditions, there was not so much focus on this low load conditions.
Right.
So by realizing that, the colleagues identify that one of the best things that could be done to
Mm-hmm.
improve the overall energy performance at the network level was really to change the signaling structure to
Mm-hmm.
allow equipment to go deeper into sleep and to sleep for a longer time when it was not used.
Okay.
So
Right.
that the base station didn't need to say quite as often,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here,
Yeah.
and communicate with the equipment. So by changing this signal structure
Mm-hmm.
in the standard for 5G, that opened up for a much more energy efficient system. So that is
Mm-hmm.
a example. And what we are doing now in 6G,
Mm-hmm.
6G is not yet in standardization, but
Right.
in
Yeah.
research. So there,
Mm-hmm.
in the ongoing projects like the
Mm-hmm.
hexa-x project, which is the biggest 6G project in Europe, there
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of sustainability considerations embedded. It's an early, it's still
Right.
early days, and it might not have come as far, but
Mm-hmm.
it's to consider these perspectives of materials efficiency and energy efficiency and
Mm-hmm.
sustainability impacts of use cases and so on uh, from start.
Right.
That is like a new thing for the telecom industry. And so I think there are great opportunities for the standardization to come.
Right, that's pretty cool. So I wanted to ask you, let's say, from a perspective of someone who's not in the telecom industry and they just want to read about what the sustainability landscape currently looks like for the competitors in this industry. So, are there any materials out there for public that we can use to understand what's going on in this domain?
Um, yeah, so you mean from
Yeah.
the perspective of comparing companies or more to get the overall picture, or what did you envision?
Yeah, yeah, something along those lines. So, for instance, if I just want to say that if let's say Nokia is doing something or Ericsson is doing something, and I just want to understand, what the current competition level is in terms of sustainability or how their products are structured around sustainability. So, are there any newsletters or any journals or any papers that one can go through, just to understand what's going on?
Yeah, maybe not a newsletter of that
Mm-hmm.
kind, which is specific to the ICT industry, which is only targeting sustainability. Then I guess most newsletters
Yeah.
and so on would touch on sustainability from time to time. But then, of course, if you go to the individual the web pages of the individual companies, they always have a sustainability page.
Right.
Um, but then you have, of course, actors like the GSMA. They have a lot of focus on sustainability, and they are quite good at communication as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that could probably be a place to start. ITU has a lot of communication. They provided a report earlier this year in a collaboration with the World Benchmarking Alliance, where they collected
Mm-hmm.
a lot of data from companies
Mm-hmm.
and showed it company by company, both when it comes to
Okay. Yeah.
their emissions reporting and
Mm-hmm.
to their target setting. And then
Right.
from
Yeah.
our own research, we are publishing
Yeah.
research where we focus on the uh, overall energy or energy usage and carbon emissions of the sector. So
Mm-hmm.
that is research that has been established by yeah, my colleagues
Right.
like Jens Malmodin, Dag Lundin, and
Uh-huh.
Nina Löfvehagen.
Okay, interesting. So, again, coming from a scientific research standpoint, how hopeful are you in terms of these big companies actually achieving the targets that they're aiming for? Let's say, having the energy emissions. So, in terms of, science, how well do you think companies are aligned with that goal?
Yeah, so I think the telecom sector is known as being quite on board when it comes to setting targets, having a net zero ambition established,
Mm-hmm.
having science-based targets in place, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I think for operators that the GSMA has played an important role to get companies on board.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that, I mean, the companies I meet are mostly the companies who are really trying to do something. So there are,
Right.
and I mean, if I look at Ericsson, we have a quite high level of
Mm-hmm.
activity to deliver on our targets, but uh,
Mm-hmm.
it might be, of course, still not specifically for the
Yeah.
ICT sector, but in general, that it's still not like it's still maybe the not the broader range of companies which
Right.
are on board, but it is still a bit limited. So it's the same players that
Mm-hmm.
are pushing the boundaries here again and again. I think that this will
Mm-hmm.
change. The landscape is changing. There will be a stronger push. After the COP27, there was um, I think there will be a stronger push for on the non-state actors. I think the governments of the world has not really delivered on the expectation from the people.
Yeah.
So I think what non-state actors will do is super important, both cities and companies. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there is a movement from and the pressure, and I think the ISO new ISO the guidelines on the net zero is part of that. Uh, that we are now to move from the commitment to focus on the commitments, because that has been the push over the last 2 years or so, to
Right.
focus on the implementation of targets. So I think there
Right.
will be a strong push on that moving forward.
Okay. Interesting. So again, asking you as an established researcher in the telecom industry, in your opinion, what are some of the avenues that you think are still untapped, but maybe research in that particular area, both in, let's say, universities as well as in industry, might help speed up the pace of achieving sustainability targets?
Yeah, that was a difficult question. I mean, it was sort of two questions in one. So to focus on where we need more research is one question, and what we need to do to get more action, higher speed, and so is maybe another question.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with the first one, I think
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, we have focused very much on climate. I think we have a quite clear view on what we need to do. So maybe the
Right.
research needed is maybe then more on the social side, to understand how to get people on board, how to get a wider range of companies on board, how to get politicians on board, how to
Mm-hmm.
move beyond the deadlocks that exist. Um,
Right.
but from the perspective of research in the sustainability domain, I think to focus more on the coming trends, I think will be around biodiversity and the wider range of planetary boundaries, while
Mm-hmm.
we have focused very much on maybe primarily climate, but
Right.
also circularity over the last few years. And I think climate and nature is the next trend that and the next topic that we must
Right.
solve
Yeah.
together.
That sounds exciting. So, Pernilla, since considering that you are at the forefront of research and technology, how do you keep up with the changing trends in the ICT industry?
Yeah, I don't know if I do, but I'm lucky because
Yeah.
from the technology perspective, working in Ericsson research, we have like
Mm-hmm.
700 researchers or so, and most
Oh,
of them
wow.
are focused on
Yeah.
technology development. And
Mm-hmm.
I also, especially I belong to the consumer and industry lab unit, and
Mm-hmm.
where we have a lot of people who are really enthusiastic and interested in tech development. So sort of
Mm.
you can get a lot of information quite passively.
Right.
For that's fortunate. For
Mm-hmm.
me, the main challenge is to keep up with the development in sustainability
Right.
domain, and there is so much going on. There are so many newsletters, there are
Mm-hmm.
so many reports being published all the
Mm-hmm.
time, a lot of new knowledge on emission gaps, or on the development of renewables, on new studies on the ICT sector, and so on and so forth. So it's a sort of, it's inspiring, of course, that a lot happens, but
Of
it's
course. Yeah.
sort of impossible to
Yeah.
keep on top of everything. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So I've noticed that you work with a lot of students joining the industry as well.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice in terms of someone who's starting their career? So what are some of the productive habits that they should incorporate that would set them up for success eventually?
Wow, productive habits. I'm not sure I have an answer to that, but what I think is important if you're an early career sustainability professional, let's say,
Yeah.
or if you are still a student, I think as a student, it would be to try to find a good internship, try to find a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
uh, find a good thesis project which is in line with the topics that you would like to work on, whether it is with your university in a more of kind of research study, or in a company. And I think
Right.
I said something around mentor. I think especially
Mm-hmm.
if you don't think you need one, or if you don't, if you come from a non-academic background and you don't have the networks yourself,
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of, I think there is a lot of I don't know, street smartness in
Yeah.
working life that you
Yeah.
can get from working with someone more experienced, and that could be someone who have been in out in, someone quite senior, but it could also
Right.
maybe be someone who is graduated 5 years before you or something. And I could mention one more thing, because
Sure
when
thing.
I
Yeah.
left university,
Mm-hmm.
a friend of mine, Lena,
Mm-hmm.
we at that time we were, as electrical engineers, we weren't too
Mm-hmm.
many women, so
Mm-hmm.
she set up this small network of people our university. We are like six, and we have
Okay.
ever since that we have met every 6 week and discussed work-related topics. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
we know each other,
Yeah.
so that we discuss other
Yeah.
topics as well. But that has really been helpful
Mm-hmm.
in the development, and especially when you're young and you may be more uncertain. I'm doing right. How should I behave in this situation, and so on. So a
Mm-hmm.
informal network that you could discuss quite openly with. I think that is also very useful. And you would also
Right.
learn about other organizations, because you cannot really know what's going on in my organization. Is that typical, or is it a bit strange, or is it very good, or yeah.
Of course, of course. So now that we are reaching the end of our conversation, Pernilla, I would rather close on the note of asking you about some of the core values that you uphold in your life that have really benefited you.
For me, work is about being a platform for
Mm-hmm.
contributing in some way to society,
Right.
however small it is, and to see how to have a platform to try to make a positive impact. And we have our vice president for corporate responsibility and sustainability, Heather Johnson. She
Mm-hmm.
has several times told us about this. There is this comparison with trying to get a flywheel to move, that we
Yeah.
all work together, and
Mm-hmm.
we finally we manage by doing our small part, and working
Yeah.
jointly, we move this flywheel a little and a little, and then it could perhaps even accelerate.
Right.
And I think when it comes
Yeah.
to sustainability, where
Mm-hmm.
challenges are enormous and it's easy to feel hopeless, I think thinking about what you do in that term, and not being discouraged because you can only impact so small things, uh, that
Yeah.
you count every little, and you see yourself as part of the much bigger process, maybe as you're a small ant working together
Right.
with all the other ants to
Absolutely.
achieve something.
Absolutely. So with that, we'll close the conversation. Pernilla, I had a very meaningful conversation with you, and I had a great time. And honestly, if there's one takeaway that I can, take from this conversation is that, piece by piece, no matter how little or small our effort is, but if we can help save the very dear planet that we live on, I think that'll be really helpful for the next generations to come who are going to reside here. So with that, we'll end the conversation as far as the audience are concerned. If you like the content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any guest recommendations, do let us know in the comment section below. Until the next episode rolls out, do take care of yourself, and we'll see you soon. Take care.